I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
My fellow citizens, the golden age of America begins right now.
Our CBC News decision desk is ready to make a call. Canada's next government will be a Liberal government.
Who's ready? Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
Tonight, I've informed our party leader that I'll be stepping down as party leader.
Thank you very much to the great people of Battle River Crowfoot.
We will build Canada strong.
You don't negotiate through weakness, you negotiate through strength.
Still no win, still no deal, still no elbows.
Unleash an incredible amount of investment and allow us to work together on important nation-building projects.
So let's give a warm welcome to our newest member of the Liberal Party, Michael Ma, MV for Union Martinville.
Well, those clips tell the story, a dramatic year in Canadian politics. Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum to look back at the year that was. Rob Russo, Canada correspondent for The Economist, former CBC Parliamentary Bureau Chief. Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Parliament Hill Bureau, and Aaron Wherry is a senior writer for CBC News. I will say watching those clips also explains some of my new wrinkles that I acquired over the past 12 months, because it was, I mean, all of us have been doing this for some time. It was a pretty dramatic year. Rob, let's start with you. What was the moment, do you think, that sort of unlocked all the change? Was it Donald Trump? Was it Justin Trudeau? Was it Chrystia Freeland? Although that happened last year. But what was the thing that stood out for you in terms of how it set events in motion, I guess?
I don't think anybody had more impact on Canadian politics in 2025 than Donald Trump. He was the one who recast the entire narrative of what the election was going to be about. I don't think that anybody, Mark Carney included, anticipated that the Liberals would be elected to a fourth term. I think in his heart of hearts, if you ask him, he would tell you that a year ago, right now, at the end of December of 2024, he thought at best he might be able to hold Mr. Poilievre to a minority government, and Mr. Poilievre would struggle in the face of the Trump reality, and maybe Liberals could win a subsequent election. So none of that would have happened without Mr. Trump. He he didn't just shift the tectonic plates of Canadian politics. He blew them up.
Yeah. And how much of that do you think, Stephanie, was the problem for Pierre Poilievre and him going from, seemingly walking into the office of Prime Minister to not at all that and losing his own riding even?
There were a lot of things going on for Mr. Poilievre that didn't go as planned. And one of the biggest ones was Justin Trudeau stepping down. He had really, in the years prior to Mr. Trudeau's decision to quit, tapped both a vein of anger amongst Canadians about their rising cost of living and the fact that at the time the Trudeau government seemed really tone deaf to it, but also just a very venomous hatred almost for Mr. Trudeau himself. They had branded all of their arguments, and by they I mean the Conservatives, as an anti-Trudeau screed. Remember Justinflation? Remember that tagline that he used to use all the time? And when you take away the villain, what happens to the fairy tale, right? And I think that narrative for Mr. Poilievre was difficult. And I was reflecting the other day about how, in the wake of Mr. Trudeau resigning on that very, very cold day, I looked at that clip and I could just remember the chill, that Mr. Poilievre disappeared for some time after that, right? He really wasn't seen anywhere. What you could see, like, what are we supposed to do? How are we going to recalibrate this narrative? And so you had Trudeau's resignation, and then, of course, you had the Trump factor. And you had, as Rob so succinctly put it, Mr. Trump sort of blowing up the Canadian political narrative. And while I think the election in April ultimately bears it out, the issues that Mr. Poilievre was very strong on, cost of living, crime, everyday boilerplate issues for Canadians, still delivered him 41% of the vote, the best result his party has had in years. And those issues remain resilient today. The problem was those weren't the top line issues. And it was very difficult for Mr. Poilievre to talk about them. His people will say around him, even if we had changed our message, what were we supposed to say every day? And they just weren't sure what to do with that. Whereas Mr. Carney was such a departure, he was so new, he was so different, he could talk about it every day because people wanted to hear what this man, this former Bank of Canada governor, this world person who had so much experience wanted to say.
Do you think, this is not a fair question, I'll say that, Aaron, but I do wonder if there wasn't a Donald Trump, would there be a Prime Minister Carney? And I wonder to what extent, that Mark Carney is fully aware of the advantage that destabilizing force gave him, both in the Liberal leadership campaign and in the election.
I mean, the truth is there probably wouldn't be a Prime Minister Carney. That said, the prize for Mr. Carney is having to deal with Donald Trump and to deal with this world and govern Canada at this moment. Look, it's impossible to look at this year and not say that Donald Trump was the biggest factor on Canadian politics, but I think it's important not to just look at that as sort of a fluke or some kind of passing fad or artificial, external event that just sort of happened to Canada. I think it became a test for the leaders. It became it changed the way Canadians looked at their leaders. It changed what Canadian voters were looking for. At least a large number of Canadian voters were looking for. And Mark Carney, at least for this spring, and Pierre Poilievre faced a test, and Mark Carney passed it, and Pierre Poilievre didn't. Now, that may change as the months go on. There's still a lot of voters that are concerned about housing and cost of living and things like that, things that aren't necessarily Donald Trump issues. But, it's hard to get away from the fact that it does seem like the world has changed, and everyone now has to deal with that new world. The Conservatives can sort of look back and say, well, they just got unlucky. But, it's sort of the fact of the world at this moment that we all have to deal with.
One of the things Conservatives also say, beyond we just got unlucky, Rob, is, well, the NDP collapsed, and so what could have, we couldn't have done anything more, which, and we'll talk about this in the next segment about Pierre Poilievre's leadership in the leadership review, but what was that collapse of the NDP surprising to you? Was it as fundamentally important to the way things unfolded, do you think?
Certainly it was critical, but was it a surprise? No, it wasn't. And therein lies the challenge for Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives as currently structured. In a two-party environment, the old saw about addition being far more important than subtraction in politics is very, very important. So where are they going to get their additional votes? When I said that things were blown up, you just look at the electorate. Boomers, seniors, who tended to vote Conservative now vote for the Liberal Party in increasing numbers. Millennials are tending to vote for Conservatives in larger numbers. If you listen to Conservatives, they say that means the future is on our side. Give Mr. Poilievre time, and he will grow that vote. To be determined, but one of the things that we have to look at when we look at what happened to the NDP vote is, again, Mr. Trump scared them into disparate camps. And a lot of those people went to the Liberals. I stood in lines and talked to people at Liberal rallies and was astonished to meet so many New Democrats who said that they couldn't. Again, another change outside of the realm of politics is people feel differently about the country, about Canada, about what they need to do as Canadians, and that's not gone away. I see it in increased recruitment for the Canadian Forces, right through to what they do at the grocery store. So they're going to have to contend with that. Conservatives are going to have to contend with that reality.
And beyond winning and becoming Prime Minister, Steph, what has struck you about the way the Prime Minister has approached this job? I mean, this goes back to sort of the interview, but when I asked him if he liked the job, there was a slight delay between the question and the answer, and I wonder what you have taken this year already from how he's governing and what that has meant for the country.
One of the things that's been so interesting, and it harkens back to sort of what we're talking about with the New Democrats to a degree, is that he has a minority government and is acting as though he does not. which is to say you don't see a lot of the overt signs of, okay, what's it going to take to get your vote on issue X? How can we help each other? Let's work together. Canadians, and you don't have to go all the way to the NDP's supply and confidence agreement to make that work. But there's definitely been so few signals, although I suppose you could also argue floor crossers, there's a signal, but of him trying to govern collectively. He believes that his idea is the right path and thinks that anyone who doesn't agree with him, well, too bad for them, he's going to do this. I find that really interesting. And the other thing I sort of took away from listening to the interview, Rosemary, was the politics of this all. And I think the jury is still a little bit out. Is Mr. Carney a politician or is he not a politician? Because when you listen to him talk, for example, as he did with you, about his relationship with Mr. Guilbeault and the MOU and how that all sort of went down, he doesn't really, that's not the thing that's giving him energy. That's not the thing that's giving him life, because he's presenting a deal that he thinks is great and he doesn't understand. He offers a little to change. If it's not enough, too bad, you're gone. And I find that interesting. And I find it interesting if, Mr. Carney's personal popularity right now obviously well outpaces that of Mr. Poilievre's, but I wonder if Liberal support comes up to meet that for Mr. Carney. It's enough that everyone likes him, but do people like what he's doing? Do they like him enough that in the next election they're willing to give him a majority?
Okay, well, that's a good place to stop, because after the break, we're going to look ahead. And Aaron, you can start us off that. What might come for Canada in 2026? Who knows? Will it be the same leaders of all these parties? We'll see. You're watching RBL. Stay there. After the whirlwind that was 2025, what could possibly be in store for the year ahead? Trade deals, leadership reviews, pipelines. Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum to talk about what they're watching for in 2026. Rob Russo, Stephanie Levitz, and Aaron Wherry. And Aaron, I'm going to start with you. What do you think will be the sort of the big story, the big thing that we should keep an eye on in 2026?
Look, it's hard to not say Trump again. But
and you can say that.
I think that is the backdrop for a lot of things going forward. But I do think, on a more specific point, I do think one of the emerging storylines is going to be national unity. The Alberta MOU negotiations, as much as we talk about it as sort of a done deal, the climate policy negotiations have to be finished by April. The pipeline proposal is supposed to come in, I believe, July 1st. Yeah. There may be an Alberta referendum at some point this year. We know there will be a Quebec election at some point this year, which may elect a Parti Québécois government. And we know that, CUSMA negotiations are going to be ongoing and potentially putting pressure on Canada along sectoral and regional lines. I think, one of the arguments in favor of the MOU, I think, is the idea that it helps strengthen national unity, or at least, potentially tamps down a threat to national unity. I think that is going to be a major storyline going forward, and I think it's going to be a major test of Mark Carney's ability to lead.
How about you, Steph? What is the issue or piece that you're going to be watching for?
Yeah, Aaron just sort of almost stole my through line there, because you do have all of these benchmarks in time that are going to add up to something. And I would add, the leadership review for Pierre Poilievre is material as well, right? And the way, I don't think he's not going to survive it, but it sets the stage for something. I'm taken by a tension that's happening in the Conservatives right now. You have Mr. Poilievre, his party's leadership, his party's convention, which a piece of which is the leadership vote. Yeah. And then within days, you're going to have a party in Ottawa honoring the 20th anniversary of the Harper government. And the sort of tension within the Conservative movement there, because there's a lot of folks in Conservative circles who are saying, if Mr. Poilievre fails to win in the next election, that's the end for him. And no one's saying he's going to fail. It's just if he fails, the party splinters and we're back into some interesting political dynamic in this country. And I think when we talk about interesting political dynamics, the New Democrat leadership race is the other piece of this, right? Who does that party ultimately choose? Which path does it want to go on? Does it want to be, a much more progressive, leftist, let's cannibalize, for lack of a better word, that element of the electorate? Do they try and bridge the gap somewhere between Mr. Poilievre's appeal to blue-collar workers and a classical, maybe a more Justin Trudeau liberal, big national programs, pharma, dental? And what does that mean both for Mr. Carney and for Mr. Poilievre? We'll have some by-elections coming, I would suspect, in the new year. And watching how those votes, either, we always say this, right? By-elections either mean absolutely everything or they mean absolutely absolutely nothing. But it is possible that you might see, depending on when those by-elections fall and who chooses to run, some of the signals there about where the electorate is in fact going.
Okay, Rob, anything left there that you want to identify or reiterate as your big issue?
A couple of things. I will start by reiterating there will be significant strains. There have been significant strains on the national fabric. I do think we need to take a moment and realize how remarkable it is to have a Conservative Premier of Alberta and a Liberal Prime Minister in Ottawa, as well as, I would say, a New Democratic Premier in British Columbia, coming off the extremes, coming towards the middle and reaching, it seems, coming towards a consensus on something like a pipeline. I think that bodes well for the future of the country. The Prime Minister needs to deliver next year. He is clearly making an effort, but he needs to deliver on some of this thing. I think he needs to be very, very mindful of the reality that Canadians are feeling in terms of the affordability crisis. It doesn't matter who you vote for or even what your income is. There isn't anybody who doesn't know what the price of beef, of poultry is these days because it's through the roof. That is a vulnerability for the Prime Minister. I would add one more potential strain on the national fabric. We are, I think, an inflection point when it comes to Indigenous people in Canada. They are having a debate right now over issues such as stewardship of the land versus ownership of resources. That's something that's going to play out next year as well when it comes to Indigenous people and the rest of us in Canada. Something like the Cowichan ruling brings up the issue of property rights versus reconciliation as well. So that's another strain at the national fabric we're going to have to look at.
I'm going to run the risk of asking this question. Is Mark Carney headed towards a potential majority? And if that were to happen, Aaron, what does that change materially for the way this country will unfold over the next 12 months in 2026?
I'm not going to make a prediction, but I will say that if he does get to a majority, it has potentially major impacts. You know, look, they're one seat away. Getting to 172 makes your life in the House of Commons a lot easier. It makes your life in committees a lot easier. It potentially gets you to 2029 without a new election, giving Mark Carney a full 4 years. And, you know, you have to think that it becomes sort of a psychological, barrier or line being crossed for Conservatives, having to ask themselves, particularly if the number 172 comes from the Conservative side, what does this say about Pierre Poilievre, and do they want Pierre Poilievre to lead them into the next election? It's just one seat, and you know, look, party membership can move around a fair bit in a parliament, but that one more seat, I think, could have, you know, big ripple effects.
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't know as we're recording this anyway that it's going to happen. But one of the things that the PM said was that there are a spectrum of MPs interested in what the government is doing. And I thought, Rob shaking his head there, I thought that was pretty interesting because it doesn't mean that they're all coming from the same place, Rob.
I noted his use of the present tense. There are people on a political spectrum that believe. So in other words, he didn't use the past tense. That suggests that there are more. And people shouldn't underestimate the role the Prime Minister is playing himself in this. I know we have this debate about whether or not he's a politician. If he's not a politician, he's playing political salesman. He is involved in these discussions, whether it's texts or whether it's meetings to close the deal. He's involved in them. That kind of language, that present tense, ensures that Mr. Poilievre and those who support him are going to have a clammy Christmas. They're going to be perspiring over the next few weeks at a minimum. But I would suggest that he needs more than one. A bare majority of 172, lots of things could happen over the next 6 months or a year to reduce that. Yeah. You would think they're going after more than one.
Steph, last minute or so to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we're presuming now that the talk of a majority comes through a floor crosser. But what about an election? What if Mr. Poilievre picks up seats in what if Mr. Carney picks up seats in a by-election? And I can give some examples, right? If Jonathan Wilkinson, who's a BC MP, many outlets, including my own, have reported he might have a diplomatic post. Would the Liberals win that seat right now? Could they pick up Matt Generou's seat in Edmonton Riverbend, if Matt Generou, the Conservative MP who says he's leaving politics? And so it could be a general election. I think nobody has 1,000% ruled out this idea that Canadians go back to the polls in the next calendar year. And so some of perhaps how the country reacts, what this means for the national fabric, is how that majority comes to be. And I would argue there is a distinction between amassing it on the backs of people who choose to switch parties versus going to Canadians and saying, okay, I need a majority. Here are the reasons. Please give me one.
Yeah. Although in the Prime Minister's mind, there is no difference. At least there didn't seem to be in the answer to that question. Rob Russo, Stephanie Levitz, Aaron Wherry, thank you for doing this, and thank you for being with us at various points through the whole year. We really appreciate it. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Merry Christmas all.
Holidays.
Thanks, guys.